All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're unpacking a really unusual explainer. We are objectively looking at a channeled spiritual message that is written entirely from the first-person perspective of a pufferfish. Yeah, you heard that right, a pufferfish. This source material presents this wild, fascinating blend of culinary critique, environmental warnings, and some serious spiritual urgency. It essentially forces us to look at our dinner plates from a completely different and honestly pretty startling angle. So to really grasp this text, we've got to start with a provocative question. The source material hooks us right out of the gate by using this deep, highly empathetic narrative arc. It's asking us to step completely out of our human perspective, where fish is just food on a plate, and forces us to consider the actual sensory experience of the animal itself.
Moving into our first major theme, the painful aquatic confession.
The text immediately hits us with these haunting cries. Literally, the author, speaking as the spirit of this pufferfish, is trying to jolt us awake, describing the absolute sheer agony of the slaughter process. The goal is clearly to just shatter that sanitized view we have of seafood and expose the raw suffering that the text claims is happening right behind the scenes, especially in those really high-end culinary kitchens.
And the source gets incredibly specific about the horrific reality of how a tiger pufferfish is prepared. We're talking about a process that involves clipping the teeth to prevent biting, stunning the fish with a knife, scraping out its organs, and then actually peeling the skin. And the text heavily emphasizes that throughout this entire grueling ordeal, the creature is fully conscious. It's a vivid, deeply unsettling picture meant to make the reader fundamentally uncomfortable with the status quo. So the source is aggressively contrasting two completely different worlds here. On one hand, you have the human view, where fugu is seen as this ultimate luxury delicacy. But the aquatic reality? Well, from the fish's perspective, it's a painfully toxic and karmically disastrous slaughter. The text is actively demanding that we look way past the beautiful culinary presentation and acknowledge these heavy, hidden costs.
Which brings us to Section 2, the deadly health risks of sashimi. Now, pivoting from the emotional plea to a stark, physical danger, think about the number 100. The source points out that the natural toxin found in a pufferfish is an unbelievable 100 times stronger than arsenic. And the text frames this not just as some fun biology fact, but as a desperate defense mechanism. The pufferfish is literally screaming through its biology, "I am entirely toxic. My eyes, my organs, my blood. Why do you still want to eat me?"
Building off that insane toxicity, the author starts questioning our basic human logic. Hundreds of people in Japan have died just for the thrill of eating fugu. The text finds it totally mind-boggling that humans would willingly risk their own lives, fully knowing that even a single prick from a toxic spine could be fatal in just a matter of moments.
This leads right into a massive push for a plant-based diet. The text is literally begging spiritual practitioners to use these cold, hard, logical health facts to overcome people's resistance. The argument is basically, hey, if compassion isn't enough to sway you, look at the state of the oceans. They're polluted by chemical and nuclear waste, fish bodies are totally riddled with parasites, and they carry high concentrations of deadly natural toxins. It's a multi-pronged approach meant to persuade people to stop eating fish right now.
Let's move to Section 3, Killing Karma and Global Crises.
Okay, so according to this spiritual framework, to understand the current state of the world, we have to grasp the concept of the karma of killing. The idea here is that the immense suffering of billions of slaughtered aquatic animals doesn't just vanish into thin air. Instead, it accumulates as this incredibly heavy, destructive energy, a collective resentment and spiritual debt. The document claims this invisible energy directly manifests in our physical world as severe environmental disasters. And that brings us to a truly fascinating, if not startling, claim. The message explicitly links the karmic weight of the fishing industry to literal shifts in the Earth's tectonic plates. The text frames natural disasters not as random geological events, but as direct acts of karmic retribution from the aquatic world. Because the global plates are connected, the consequences of this widespread slaughter are entirely global.
This naturally flows into Section 4, Disaster Countdown and Retribution.
The text lays out this incredibly frightening timeline for the reader. It claims that in past years, divine protection has somehow delayed disaster. But in the present day, that silent accumulation of resentment has hit an absolute critical limit. As for the imminent future, the source specifically warns that Japan's landmass is extremely fragile, arguing it stands on the brink of literally sinking due to this unchecked karmic debt from heavy seafood consumption.
Then,
the pufferfish entity delivers this incredibly ominous final warning. It's essentially saying that the current calm we might be experiencing is just the quiet before an unavoidable karmic storm. When we fall silent, that is when we will turn the world upside down. It's a really powerful rhetorical device used to instill a deep, immediate sense of undeniable crisis in whoever is reading it.
Thankfully, we get to Section 5, Concrete Actions for Compassion.
To actually mitigate this looming disaster, the source demands some very precise, active steps. Passive belief? Yeah, that's no longer going to cut it. We're talking about actively repenting for past karma, doing good deeds to intentionally transfer spiritual merit over to aquatic life, and, most importantly according to the text, courageously preaching the truths of releasing life and adopting a vegetarian diet.
The author is clearly frustrated here. Really frustrated with spiritual practitioners who know this truth but just stay completely silent. And why? Usually out of fear that the general public won't accept a vegetarian lifestyle. The text challenges them directly, urging people not to let the fear of society's entrenched habits silence their message. Because if you don't speak up, the text argues, nothing will ever change, and that disaster becomes completely inevitable.
And that wraps up our explainer for today, leaving us with one final, incredibly provocative challenge straight from the source material. It asks us to confront some pretty uncomfortable truths about what we consume. Are we going to face the reality of how our food is processed, or are we just going to cover our eyes until it's too late? Regardless of where you stand personally on karma or channeled spirits, you have to admit this text offers a really intense perspective on the intersection of human appetite, animal welfare, and our global ecosystem. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I will catch you next time.